December. Here we go with our meeting, Garden City Planning and Zoning Commission, Wednesday, December 21st, 2022. Obviously, our audio and recording check is working, and we'll jump in with the Pledge of Allegiance right now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll just say again, we had our work session earlier, but just for the sake of saying it again, all commissioners are here: Commissioner Shepard, Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Montoya, and Commissioner Wild. So for staff, any changes to the agenda?
Chairman, there are no changes to the agenda by staff.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Right now, it contains the minutes from our November 16th, 2022 meeting. Also, subdivision FY 2022-4 L Estates, a combined preliminary final plat processed as a planned unit development. That Aria or the applicant is requested to be moved to an undetermined date. So we'll add that to the consent agenda as well. The other ones, so there's items C and D under public hearings on page 2 of the agenda are 2 conditional use permit applications that we will hear together. However, I wanted to see if we could add those to the consent agenda. So in order to do that, and by the way, adding any item to the consent agenda, we do it from time to time. If all the pieces and parts of the application are in place and there's no controversy about the application, a lot of times we could just add those to the consent agenda. But in order to do that, I have a couple of questions I need to ask. So for those 2 items, C and D, again, if we do hear those, we will hear those together. So these questions I'm about to ask apply to both of those applications. So is there anyone in the audience who would like to give public testimony on either of those conditional use permit applications? Conditional use permit FY 2023-2 and conditional use permit FY 2023-3. Okay, is the applicant present?
Yes, I'm Gary Abrams, representing Crown Castle for both T-Mobile and AT&T. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you very much, sir.
Excellent.
Have you had the opportunity to review the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and draft decision, including the draft conditions of approval?
Yes, we've reviewed the conditions for both.
And do you agree or consent to these documents in the affirmative, including all conditions of approval?
We do, on behalf of Crown.
I'm sorry, what was that last thing you said?
We do. I do, on behalf of Crown, yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. The last question is, does staff or any member of the commission have any reason that they feel this item should be heard?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brown.
I believe I would like to request that we actually hear those.
Very good.
But I also would request, because it probably won't take very long to answer my question I want to ask of the gentleman. If you would entertain moving those, I believe you can do that as the chairman, and so that we hear those 2 before we hear the subdivision.
Okay, let's do that. So we will hear both conditional use permit applications, but we will hear those first before item A under public hearings. Okay. Potentially the other 2 that could go into The consent agenda are item F and item G. So CPA FY 2023-1. It's a code text amendment for surety regulations. So I'll ask those questions for that one as well. Obviously, let's do this one first. Is there anyone in the audience who wanted to give public testimony on that item? CPA FY 2023-1. Okay, I know the applicant's present. Let's see. I'll just ask the staff or any member of the commission have any reason that they feel this item should be heard. Okay, so we can add that one to the consent agenda. Also, item G, CPA FY 2023-2. It's another code text amendment for extension regulations. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to give public testimony on that item? Okay. Does staff or any member of the commission have any reason that they feel this item should be heard? Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Brown.
perhaps you ought to look at item number E also.
I should have said first, I think I want to hear that item. So we're gonna,
Okay.
yes. So the consent agenda now contains the approval of our minutes from November 16th. Item B under the consent agenda, subdivision FY 2022-4 L Estates. And then items F and G under public hearings. So CPA FY 2023-1 and CPA FY 2023-2. So I think we're ready for our consent agenda motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shepherd.
I move for approval of the consent agenda consisting of the minutes from the November 16th, 2022 meeting, and that item B, SUB FY 2022-4 L Estates be moved to a date undetermined, and that item F, CPA FY 2023-1 code text amendment financial surety regulations, and item G, CPA FY 2023-2 code text amendment extension regulations, that both of them be moved to the consent.
Okay, there's our motion.
Second the motion.
And we have a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 And aye. Okay. Those items are all, let's see, code text amendments. We're a recommending body for those. So our recommendation is off to City Council to approve those. And I think that's the last thing I needed to say there. So we're off to hearing our first item, which are the two conditional use permits. Again, we'll hear those together. CUP FY 2023-2. Conditional use permit, Gary Abrams. I'll let you correct me when you come back on if I mispronounce that. With GMA Network Services LLC on behalf of Crown Castle is requesting cell tower improvements on an existing structure located at 8247 West State Street, Ada County. Also CUP FY 2023-3 conditional use permit, Gary Abrams with GMA Network Services LLC on behalf of Crown Castle is requesting cell tower improvements on an existing structure located also at 8247 West State Street in Ada County. Okay, sir. How these hearings go is after my introduction, which I just did, you have a 15-minute presentation slot. City staff report comes after that for 15 minutes. And then we'll go do the public hearing if there is one. You'll be able to provide rebuttal on any of that, either staff's presentation or the public hearing. And then we'll close the public hearing and then the commission members will discuss and come to a motion. So that's how this will flow tonight. So sir, you're up.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Gary Abrams, GMA Network Services on behalf of Crown Castle for T-Mobile and AT&T. Would it be appropriate if I could ask a clarification question just on procedure? So to hear them both at the same time, I actually have a slide deck for one each for AT&T and T-Mobile. What I could do is basically utilize one of them to go through both projects, if that would be worthwhile. And then I can add in any questions or specifics. But rather than go through two slide decks, which are somewhat redundant, I'll just use one, if that would be acceptable to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I think that sounds terrific to just use one PowerPoint.
Okay. So I'm going to try to share a screen, and hopefully we'll be successful in that regard. So hold on a second. Share. All right. And is my screen apparent?
We see you and your presentation. Yes, you're good.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so the address is 8247 West State Street, Garden City. We're before the Planning and Zoning Commission, December 21st, 2022. A few pictures of the subject site. This is looking south. There's an existing monopole structure on the property along with associated radio cabinets at the base. This is an aerial photo of it. You can see the shadow of the existing monopole and the radio equipment cabinets at the base. Few other photos from a variety of different directions. Overall site plan, West State Street is here. This is looking north. Here is the existing site. So you've got two different proposals. AT&T is proposing a first-time installation. What that means is AT&T is not there now. They're proposing to co-locate at the 90-foot level of the tower and install its 8x8 walk-in cabinet at the base with an emergency generator in a 15 by 20 foot area, which is west of the existing fenced enclosure. So T-Mobile is currently on site, and they're proposing under their conditional use permit application to install an emergency generator, which is here. So if you will, this is the existing facility, existing monopole and base station. And this is T-Mobile's proposed expansion area with a generator, emergency generator. And this is AT&T's proposed area with their emergency generator and their 8x8 walk-in cabinet. This is an elevation of the existing monopole. T-Mobile's already on the monopole, but AT&T would install at the 90-foot level, as shown here. And this is a photo that shows, this is again, the existing site, and this is the expansion area. So we are looking south. This would be T-Mobile's expansion area with their emergency generator, and this would be AT&T's expansion area. This is an eligible facilities request under FCC section 6409. And so long as it meets all of the elements of section 6409, it's entitled to streamline processing under the shot clock rules, and the proposal can't be conditioned or denied. Again, there are two subject applications that we're talking about. One is T-Mobile to install an emergency generator, and AT&T to do a first-time installation, attaching to the existing tower and locating their 8x8 walk-in cabinet along with their emergency generator. Both projects comport with all elements of section 6409. And with that, available for any questions or clarifications, but substantially that is a run through of both applications.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Brown.
since I asked this to be heard, and I appreciate your presentation, let me ask a question, and it may be your last slide, Mr. Schneider, and I realize that you did not participate in this when the previous CUs were approved for this site in 2003 and 2005. And you have said that you, on behalf of the two applicants, that you were agreeable with all the requirements. Most of those requirements, in fact, maybe all of them, involving landscaping, taking down a chain link fence that has barbed wire on it, and putting around privacy fencing, were requirements in those previous CUs. So my question is, and apparently we don't have a choice about whether or not we're going to approve this in accordance with federal law, but are we likely to see those conditions being performed, or will they be something that is not going to happen again?
And I apologize. Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, as I understand it, I've discussed this with Crown. My understanding is that the conditions that are referenced are pertain to the original CUP approval. Going back, I think you said 2003. That was my understanding. It was about 20 years ago. So they're original conditions from the CUP. And my understanding is that a jurisdiction cannot impose new conditions on an application. However, the original CUP contained certain conditions that were not complied with. And again, my understanding of 6409 is those are two completely different things. Is that the original conditions from the CUP, which were not complied with, compliance can be enforced, but they are not new conditions per se. And so in talking to Hannah and in going through the conditions that have been outlined in both staff reports, is all that's been reiterated is the original conditions from 20 years ago. None of those are new conditions today. And I've asked for further clarification from Crown, but my understanding to date is that if it was an original condition that was not complied with, that it can be enforced at this time. Timing is I honestly, at this hearing, I cannot stipulate in terms of timing. Hannah had mentioned at the DRC hearing on Monday that prior to building permit approval, the landscaping would have to be installed or bonded around. And, you know, I'm not a 6409A expert to that degree, so I can't stipulate in terms of the timing of that. But that's my understanding from CANA is the way the city is approaching it. So I hope that answers the question, but my understanding is that the landscape condition from 2003 needs to be complied with as part of this project.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Commissioner Brown.
And so the answer to my first question, what about the problematic fence that's there at the time? I presume that that's a similar answer, only to the extent that that was part of the original CUP. Is that correct?
Correct. And I apologize, I don't have that specific condition in front of me at the moment, but that was a condition from the original CUP. It will need to be addressed at this time.
All right, thank you very much. That was the only question that I really had.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions since we have the applicant? Okay, nope. Okay, staff.
A good afternoon, or I guess evening, commissioners and Mr. Chairman. I would like to just essentially keep my staff report short and sweet. We are combining conditional use permit fiscal year 2022 0002 and conditional use permit fiscal year 2023, pardon me, 2023 for both of them, number 2 and number 3. I would like to stand by my staff report, and any and all comments within that staff report I can answer questions to. I would like to clarify a little bit on the Spectrum Act as far as what staff understands. You can find it in the staff report under the discussion portion, but essentially, according to the Spectrum Act, a state or local government may not deny and shall approve any eligible facilities request for a modification of an existing wireless tower or base station that does not substantially change the physical dimension of such tower or base station. That is taken directly out of the Spectrum Act that was given to us as part of the submittal documents. A modification that substantially changes the physical dimensions of a tower or base station is that it lists it out, but what does constitute as a substantial change is if it does not comply with conditions associated with prior approval of construction or modifications to the tower. So as analyzed, the application does not comply with the conditions set forth in previous approvals for the construction of this wireless tower. And it stops understanding that the commission can deny the application or add additional conditions of approval. However, with that being said, staff has done a thorough analysis of the site and has determined that basically all code compliance issues are in relation to previous conditions of approval. So despite having the lack of landscaping, the lack of irrigation, the lack of street trees, and there's pedestrian access conversations or discussions that I could also dive into, but essentially it is compliant at this point in time. And then the chain link fence with slats and barbed wire, all those mentioned in the staff report have been conditioned in the decision document to for approval prior to the issue of a building permit issuance. That way the landscaping, the barbed wire, the chain link fencing, etc., is actually installed, or at least there's a surety bond for those improvements that are not only required of this application or these applications, but they were required of previous conditional use permits that have allowed for this legal non-conforming use to stay within the C2 zoning district where it's at. So with that, I stand for questions.
Questions for Hannah?
Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Montoya.
thank you. So is this tower on an easement or leased property?
It's on a leased property.
Okay, so the underlying owner, is there any application to the requirements of the CUP that we pass down to the underlying owner rather than the lessee?
So the conditional use permit 0505 CU that's mentioned in the staff report was for the underlying owner. It was for a vehicle services provider. And essentially it would come down to a civil dispute between whether or not the leasee is responsible for these improvements or if it's the property owner.
And was that interpretation based on legal counsel's recommendation on this matter?
That has been based off of how we've processed applications as such in the past.
But this is a secondary use to the primary use of the ownership, correct?
Correct.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. All right. Next step is to open it for the public. If there's anybody in Zoom, I don't think we have anybody in the room that wants to give testimony to this. Oh, wait, we already know, but I'll still ask because when we tried to put it on the consent agenda, is there anybody out there that wants to provide testimony on this, whether it's on Zoom or in the room? Okay. So it's your turn again, sir. You can provide any rebuttal if you had any.
I do not have any rebuttal at this time. Understood that the only comment I would make is that the proposed modifications are not a significant change under the Spectrum Act, Section 6409. For the foregoing notwithstanding regarding staff's comments about prior conditions of landscaping.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. We'll close the public hearing then and move to a discussion among the commission members. Commissioner Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After hearing Hannah discuss that the conditions must be met before the building permit, or that a surety must be in place to ensure that those conditions are met, that makes me feel better about moving towards approval. I don't really have any other comments to make on it right now.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I happen to agree with Commissioner Shepherd. I have a lot of concern because really what we're putting on requirements are all of the requirements as was pointed out by Hannah and pertain to the previous two CUs in which they weren't complied with. And it's complicated by the fact, first by the federal law that has to do with it. Number two, by the fact that this applicant doesn't own the property underneath. And if I understand it, the second CU pertained to the property owner, not to this particular leasee that's on it. But I think Hannah, and I actually talked to Hannah about this afternoon, I think she's done about as good a job as she could do. And it'll be interesting to see if any landscape or anything ever shows up on it. But given that, I think I would support recommending approval or approving of this the way Hannah wrote it up.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brown. I'll just interject really quick. I agree too, leaning towards approval. Commissioner Montoya.
I would lean towards approval as written as the requirements by staff for the conditional approval.
Great. Commissioner Wild.
I'm in the same boat.
Okay. We're ready for our motion, it sounds like to me.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wild.
I move approval of CUP FY 2023-2. I think we should do them separate.
We could do them the same, could we? Or do we have to do separate motions? I mean, we can, I just.
If it's articulated in such a way, I suppose you could do one motion.
Well, let's make sure we do it right.
It's cleaner probably to do two.
Let's do that then. Okay, thank you for asking that. So, okay. So we have a motion for CUP FY 2023-2. And is there a second?
I'd second.
All those in favor of approval, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Let's move to our motion for the second one.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wild.
I move approval of CUP FY 2023-3 as written.
I'll second that also.
Okay, Commissioner Brown with a second. All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. All right, you're approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Appreciate your time as well.
Have a great Christmas. We'll move now to back to A under public hearings. Subdivision FY 2022-7 Quad 6 subdivision. Preliminary plat processed as a plan unit development. Boy, I hope I'm saying this right too. Jaden Schneider with Bronzebow Land is requesting a residential subdivision consisting of 7 residential lots and 1 common lot located at 4640 North Adams Street, Ada County in the R3 medium density zoning district. Mr. Schneider. All right, you're up, sir. 15 minutes.
All right, thank you, Commissioners, Chairman. My name's Bill.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're probably just about to do this, but just for this, your name and address for the record.
My name's Bill Tillman, 11061 West Wagon Pass Street, Boise, Idaho. I'm not Jaden, Bill Tillman. I'm the owner, partner. My other partner's here as well. Jaden is on Zoom. He's our engineer, and he is here to answer any technical questions that I'm not able to answer. So,
okay, thank you.
Let's see. Can we pull this up here, Hannah? Where's it at? Thank you. So again, yes, Quad 6 subdivision, we're asking for a preliminary plat approval through a PUD. Let's see. So our proposed subdivision here is 7 townhome lots. The property is just under a half an acre. It's R3 zoning. 7 attached townhome lot units and 2 common lots. I believe Jaden and Hannah had some emails earlier today about going from 1 lot back to 2 common lots on that. I'm sure she'll address that in her report as well. All common lots will be owned and operated and maintained by the HOA. Within this project, we're asking for 3 variances. The first one would be a 10-foot setback off of Adams for the garage here. We are asking for a variance on visitor parking to be within the driveways of the units. And we're asking for 0 lot line setbacks on these 2 interior lots here. Here's a parking diagram of what we have. We obviously have 2-car garages for every unit, which is required enclosed parking spaces. So we do have 14 that we're providing. And the guest spaces, we're required to have 4 guest parking spaces. However, in our variance to have them be compact parking spaces, we're actually going to provide 14 of them in the driveways here. So we are asking for them to be approximately 8 feet wide by 15 feet deep compared to a 10 by 20 foot, which would be code. Our open space here is about just under 3,500 square feet, which exceeds well beyond what's required for code. And in part of that open space, we're doing a cross-access easement for the sidewalk to everybody's front doors going through here, as noted in red. We have front and rear elevations there. This is the elevation from the Adams Street side. And on Monday, we noticed that there were no windows on this middle floor here. And so we were not able to add them before today, but they will be added in final plans. Just a quick kind of overview of finishes and design style. And that's really it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brown.
Actually, I think that most of these questions I want to address the engineer, and that would be Jaden.
Correct.
Okay. Jaden, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. I presume that you have read the report from the Garden City engineer, Mr. Joe Canning.
Yes, sir, I have.
I'm going to address my questions to you around two items that concern me in reading your plans and looking at them. And first of all, I have to qualify myself a little bit. I am a licensed professional civil engineer in this state. And one of my areas of expertise is drainage. So my first question has to do with compliance with the floodplain ordinance in Garden City. Are you familiar with that?
I would say that I'm familiar enough with the plan. I do know that there are a number of issues or conditions to be aware of, specifically trying to bring up the finished floor elevation outside of the floodplain. I believe for this particular site, there's about a 2-foot fill that would need to be either added to the site for each individual building to be brought out of the floodplain and into code compliance, or we need to look at adding some sort of finished floor elevation that is raised up in comparison to the rest of the site. So I have an understanding of it, but I might not be as well versed as somebody who has done it for many years directly in floodplain analysis and conditions of that matter.
Well, let me cut to the chase, and you're going to have to check that because, and then after I give a little bit of information, then I will ask you how difficult you think that it might be for you to come into compliance. As it is currently planned, now remember, I have not done an official review of this, but the base flood elevation at that location is 2642. The Garden City floodplain ordinance requires, and the reason for that is because all of Garden City, or almost all of Garden City, was not updated in the most recent flood maps because it was placed in a position where we are still operating with the old flood plans, the floodplain maps, because it was put in a seclusion zone. So to accommodate that, you have in your plans where you say that the base floor elevation would be 2643, which is 1 foot more than that. In fact, the requirements in Garden City are 2 feet. And the reason for that is because eventually there's going to be, our floodplain maps will be based upon the new studies at some point. And that more than likely, as Mr. Canning pointed out, will probably be about 2644, which would place it above a foot above the base floor elevation. So with that a little bit, you're going to have to check my information, okay? How significant of a problem for you will it be to essentially raise that elevation of the building sites 2 feet?
So I've done a preliminary analysis of what we would propose for the finished floor elevation, for instance, what you're mentioning, and you are correct. We had a finished floor elevation proposed of 2643 with the existing surface in the general area being 2642. So you're right, we only had proposed a 1 foot elevation change. And I did read the report and concur with what you're saying about a 2 foot elevation change. So through our preliminary look at it, the proposal that I believe we had originally looked at was providing a finished floor elevation for the garage, which was lower than the rest of the homes, as well as adding a stoop with steps on the front of the individual homes in order to raise them up and they have the buildable, livable space out of the flood elevation. As Bill's showing here on that southwest elevation on Adams Street, this was one of the options we had looked at, potentially bringing the entire back half of the site, or I'll call it the back half, but it's the front of the elevations for the townhomes and would be the east side of the site up, while leaving the garage area within that original site. The main concern being that we don't want to have to propose a extremely steep driveway. And if I'm understanding the code compliance correctly, the finished floor elevation related to the livable space and not particularly the garage. So all in all, we believe that we'll be able to find a way to include either steps up onto a finished floor elevation, steps in a garage, or look at grading the rear portion of the site higher in order to meet that compliance. But I could be completely incorrect on that, and your input or advice in this situation is totally appreciated.
I have a second, Mr.
Brown. Sure.
I had a second one, and again, I'm looking at Mr. Canning's report, and it has to do with drainage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware that this is a preliminary plat that you're filing with, that it's not the finished thing. But you understand the implications of the fact that he reminds you that the requirement will be for retaining a 50-year event on site. And unless they change this, and unless they change their policies, one thing he alludes to in there is the possibility of getting a waiver from ACHD to put some drainage in the street. And unless they've changed their policies, that will not happen. So given that, I would appreciate your comment on whether you have something in mind on how you're going to develop the capability to retain that much water on that site.
Yes, sir. I believe that in the staff report, it talks about this, but the proposed roadway for the site is proposed as a private drive and not as an ACHD owned or maintained roadway through there. And if I'm understanding it correctly, as the private drive allows the site to utilize a little bit more creative drainage measures, such as permeable pavers and drainage structures that are a little bit more pertinent to stormwater management on the site. So I believe that unless I'm understanding it incorrectly, I believe that the stormwater management can be utilized either by an idea following the permeable pavers idea within the private drive, or a subsurface stormwater disposal within the common area on what we're calling Lot 5, which is in that emergency turnaround area through there. We have had our geotechnical report come back, and I was trying to pull it up to find out the exact groundwater level, but I do not believe that we are in a particularly high groundwater situation for this. I think that it is somewhat reasonable. And I understand that even within ACHD standards, there are methods such as a vertical sand filter that we can use in tight situations for this. So you're correct. I have not run the preliminary numbers on a stormwater management for the entire site, but I do believe that there are standard and typical options that we can move forward with for the stormwater management for the entire site. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, that's sufficient. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Let's move to, excuse me, by the way, staff.
I might just use the same presentation. Have it pulled up. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. This is subdivision fiscal year 2022-0007 for Quad 6 subdivision. We received resubmittals on December 5th and December 8th, which attempted to address the comments and concerns brought up by the Design Review Committee and staff at the November 7th Design Review hearing. It's understood that while I was away, the application did not have a November 16th Planning and Zoning hearing. During the previous Design Review Committee meeting, the road within the subdivision was unclear as if it would be a private road or an ACHD owned and operated road. Since then, ACHD has submitted a staff report claiming that it will not be under their control and it will be labeled as a shared private driveway. On Monday, December 19th, so this last Monday, the Design Review Committee recommended approval for this application as long as with additional conditions such as additional fenestrations and glazing on the street side facade of Lot 1. So facing Adams Street, as well as having landscaping between the driveways, and as long as that landscaping is maintained by the HOA, as well as having the grade changes can't be stepped or the foundation can't be obviously noticeable on the facade unit or the unit's facades. Rather, that facade treatment needs to continue with the grade. The developer has increased the landscape buffer width between the adjacent, I'll call it western property and the driveway pavement. The previously proposed landscape buffer was only about 1 foot, whereas now it has been increased to 3 feet, and it's to follow along the common drive. This common this landscape area also is proposed to have landscaping that is tall and vertical, so it allows for that vertical screening. Site plans also show an increased front yard setback adjacent to Adams Street. It has been increased from 5 feet to 10 feet to allow for those class 2 street trees that was requested and has been conditioned of staff. The new architectural plan has been provided to include elevation relief between the residences in an attempt to demonstrate a variety of architectural features. Furthermore, the street side elevation of Unit 1 has been updated and the interior site plan has been adjusted to allow for additional fenestrations. The previously proposed common lot that had separated the front of the dwelling units, so along that eastern property boundary line, has been removed, so that's no longer a common lot. Instead, the property boundary lines have been extended to the east, and a 10-foot wide easement for that public pedestrian pathway, or not public, sorry, the pedestrian pathway can run through there. In the staff report, it was noted that with the elimination of this common lot, it dwindled the common lot count from 2 common lots to 1. However, in conversation today with the applicant, there are still 2 common lots, the first being this paved common driveway and the second being the landscaped area of the open space. So in saying that, the condition document has changed, or it has not been updated since the discovery of the fact that there are still 2 common lots. So instead of being an lot. We're going back to the original proposed 9 lots. The residential lot stays the same though at 7. So as far as the waivers that have been requested and drafted by staff, we have 4. The first being more than 4 units on a common drive. The second being reduction to setbacks. So it allows for a 0 side yard setback along units 4 and 6 to accommodate that common open area lot. The third waiver being guest parking in the driveways, allowing for those guest parking spaces to be the requested 8 feet by 15 feet, which it differs from the 10 by 20 foot parking space required by code. And the fourth waiver is a reduction to the required garage width. The garage width is requested to be 19.8 inches as opposed to the 20 feet that is required in code. So it's a pretty minuscule change. Staff would also like to add an additional waiver. It would go under the reduction of setbacks waiver. So on top of allowing the 0 foot side yard setbacks to lot 4 and 6, we would also be allowing a slight difference for the front setback of lot 1. So the base zoning district requires that the front setback of lot 1 be 5 feet or 20 feet, with 5 feet being for any part of the facade that isn't the garage, and the 20 feet being for the garage. That is base zoning requirements. What is being requested to allow for what is proposed would be a 5 foot setback or a 10 foot setback. So the difference is the 10 versus the 20 foot setback. And essentially this waiver, if granted, is to allow for that garage to be just encroach in that traditional setback by 10 feet. And staff would also like to make a clarification. While the application is a planned unit development, it is not required to provide a variety of housing types, simply just because it is under the 10 dwelling unit threshold of Garden City Code 86B7, which requires the variety of housing types. Staff has drafted conditions of approval, which are required to be met prior to permits being released. These items are such as landscaping in the waivers that have been drafted. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Hey, thank you, Hannah. Any questions for staff? Okay. All right, well, we will open it up for the public to provide any testimony on this application. If there's anybody out there in the audience or on Zoom. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anybody wishing to provide testimony. So the applicant can come back up and provide any rebuttal that they may have.
Do you need me to repeat my name and address again?
No,
okay,
you're good. Thank you.
We don't have any rebuttal. Just want to thank you guys. We're excited to do this project here in Garden City. And yeah, thank you for your time. And yeah, we appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Okay, the public hearing is closed then. We'll move to a discussion amongst the commission members about this application. Commissioner Wild.
I'm supportive of it. It looks like a good project. I know it's a preliminary plan, so it's early, but looks like a good project. I mean, we keep talking about density. It's dense. I think Commissioner Brown asked a good question, but it sounds like there's still not real clear whether, the drainage will be to that common lot on the overhead diagram, grassy, whatever, French drain or something there, and maybe some permeable surfaces, but it looks like a good project to me.
Commissioner Montoya.
Thank you, Chairman. I would agree. I think that the project looks good. I would support the application, and I don't have any issues or additional questions. So
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, before I asked those questions, I wasn't so sure if I was going to be able to say what I'm going to say. I like the project, and that's a challenging site, which I'm very familiar with that particular site. And I think it's a challenge. And I think he understands that these items that I mentioned were mentioned in Joe Canning's report. I think they're going to have a little bit of a challenge, but sounds to me like he understands that, and they should be able to fix it. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepherd.
Thank you. I also am in favor of it. I'm assuming that the city engineer and the engineers on the site know what they're doing and fully understand all of the elevations and everything. So as far as all of that, if all of that is good, I'm good with it.
Okay, thank you. As am I. So I think we can move to our motion on this one. Commissioner Wild.
No, Mr. Chair, I move approval of SUB FY 2022-7 Quad 6 subdivision and recommend approval of the preliminary plat.
Okay, there's our motion. Any second?
So, Chairman, I'll just make sure that we're also including the waiver for the 10-foot setback from the garage.
Thank you. Yep, I made a note and forgot to say it. I'll add to my motion to address that 10-foot. I guess it's really a variance or a waiver that Hannah addressed for a 10-foot setback instead of the 20 that's set in code. I'll also note that on our agenda, it does have one common lot, and as presented, it's got the private drive with the hammerhead and the grassy common lot. So it's got two common lots instead of one.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so sir, we're a recommending body. So all we do here tonight with your application is recommend that city council take action on it. And so obviously our recommendation is that it be approved. So your next step is city council. So thank you. All right. We'll move on to item B under public hearing subdivision FY 2022-8 Chandler subdivision. Nicolette Womack with Kindly Horn is requesting new construction of 12 single-family townhomes and 2 fourplex buildings. The project is currently located at 401 East 52nd Street, Ada County, in the R3 medium density residential zoning district. So, Nicolette, Ms. Womack. Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Chair, no worries.
I looked
Mr.
up
Chair.
after I said
Yeah,
that.
I am in fact not Nicolette. She's much prettier.
Okay.
It's just Joe Dodson with Kimley Horn,
Gotcha.
1100 West Idaho Street, Suite 210. in
Thank
Boise.
you.
So thank you for having me tonight. Bear with me as I'm used to being in Hannah's seat on the public side. So just excuse me if I misspeak on some of this. Project before you tonight would be Chandler's Place. It is an application for a combined preliminary and final plat consisting of 13 total lots, which is 1 common lot and 12 single family lots. We have our applicant team here tonight. We have the developer, Mr. Russell here. Nicolette is also here. We have myself, Abby and Kelly are here. Kelly is in person and Abby is online. They're our engineers for the project. We do have Jennifer Moore, our architect as well. So if you have any of the questions about elevations, architecture of the buildings, Jennifer will be your point of contact for that. Just quickly wanted to go over the timeline. As you know, a lot of time goes into these projects beforehand, but specifically with the timeline to get to where we are today, we had the pre-app in June. We had our neighborhood meeting and submittal in August. We had our design review commission hearing on Monday, and then now we're here tonight. We do have a January hearing date for city council, barring any setbacks tonight that I hope do not occur. Here, we wanted to provide a zoomed out vicinity map just to show you our proximity to Chinden and the Greenbelt, as well as the Expo Center. So, future land use map for the site does designate the site as mixed use residential and is along the Main Street corridor, while being also part of the commercial neighborhood activity node delineated by the red dash line. So this mixed use residential designation anticipates higher density, a mix of uses, et cetera, as does the Main Street corridor, which calls for higher, taller buildings along this main corridor to connect Adams Street to the Expo Center. The property is already zoned R3, which is medium density residential. In your code, it allows up to 35 units per acre and does have a minimum density requirement based upon the neighborhood commercial node as well. So again, not requesting any kind of rezone here, just platting it through a CUP. Sorry, through a PUD. This is a zoomed in vicinity map of the site, just to kind of clearly show the adjacent uses. So to the north/northeast is going to be a new detached single family home that did have to obtain a CUP within that R3 district to be constructed. To the east is duplex subdivision. To the south is an ACHD right-of-way lot, which is encumbered by a number of public utility easements. And to the west are some industrial uses. So again, the applications that we are asking for a recommendation of approval on tonight are a combined preliminary and final plat, which is being processed as a PUD and design review. Site is approximately 0.7 acres. Again, we're requesting 12 single family units here, which are both detached and attached. There's 2 fourplexes and then 4 detached structures. Density for the site is approximately 17.5 acres. And again, the existing zoning is R3. Through the PUD, we are requesting, I guess, 2 waivers. One to the guest parking spaces. Instead of being 10 feet wide, we are requesting 9 feet of width. And then requesting some waivers to the interior setbacks. So we have the 0 lot lines, but we also have each of the building lots has a minimum 3.5 foot setback around it as well. So that would be our main waivers there. In the staff report, there was discussion about common drive versus private drive. They can be used interchangeably, but specifically to this, we are proposing a private street, so we do not need a waiver for the number of units off of a common drive. This is our proposed parking. Use green and red because Christmas is right around the corner here. So we have the detached guest spaces are in red, and we are required to provide 6. We are proposing 6, with one of them being on the street. And then we have each unit will have a 2-car garage meeting the dimensional standards. Also in the staff report, it was noted that we did not submit a open space exhibit for staff to analyze. And since then we have submitted this. At the Monday hearing, Hannah did note that upon initial review that we do comply with the open space standards. So that is good news. On Monday, there were some questions regarding the site, specifically along fencing. So I wanted to just be very clear about what fencing is being proposed. Along the east boundary, delineated in red, is an existing 6-foot wood fence that separates this property from the duplexes to the east. And then we are proposing a 6-foot vinyl fence along the north boundary to help have more privacy and screening to the detached single family home to the north. There was a question about what fencing would be along the south boundary. We are not proposing any because we are doing the hedges and the evergreen trees, the columnar evergreen trees, to help screen from that. It's basically just a weed lot, unfortunately, that our developer does not currently own. That's owned by ACHD to the south. Did just want to note that we are compliant with the sustainability point requirement for the city of Garden City. You know, we're allowing solar collectors, drip irrigation, some dedicated recycling bins for each unit, as well as on-site stormwater retention. There's a brief discussion, I guess you could say, about the project layout and our different building types. There are multiple building types, specifically regarding the height of the building as well as their number of bedrooms. So you can see the different letters here. You can see my mouse. There's A's, B unit, C's, and then C1 and D. So A, B, and C are 4 stories. A and B, as you can tell, are detached, but they are 4-story tall. Unit C is a 4-story townhome with, it's basically a 4-plex, but they are, again, all single family for purchase. And then building D, type D, building 1, is a 3-story detached unit. And at the very north end as well, there's type C1 is also a 3-story unit. And this is to help step down into height from the proposed product to the detached single family home to the north. This ties directly into where we find that we do comply with the unit variation requirement from being more than 10 units on a site for as part of the PUD. So through that code, we believe that we meet the variation with unit size, the bedroom counts, obviously the building height that we noted, the site location of each unit, whether being interior to the east or along 52nd Street to the west, as well as being at the end of the 4-plex or being in an interior unit. And then the obvious difference is the attached versus detached difference. At this point, I will hand it over to our architect to go through the elevations with you.
Evening. Jennifer Moore, architect and partner at Collab Architects, 750 West Bannock Street, number 611. So thank you for being here tonight. So I wanted to just quickly walk you through some of the elevations and some of the floor plans, just at a really high level, but I can answer any questions that you have about any of them if you want to get into any detail. What you see in front of you right now is just kind of some of the basis of what we're thinking for these elevations. This isn't what they look like or what is proposed, but some of these elements you'll see further down are some of those things that we're starting to kind of pick and choose from. These are just some of those inspirational images that we've gathered. So again, the building layout, Joe already walked through all this, so we'll just move right through here. And so this is the Allworth Street side elevation. This is that elevation on the ACHD right of way. We did receive a comment from DR, or a condition from DR, to add a little bit of fenestration to the Allworth elevation. And so we'll do that as we kind of develop the design a little bit further. And so this is the 52nd Street elevation. You can kind of see that 3-story on the left, and that's right next to that next door neighbor. That's a single family house over there, just to kind of step down to in scale. And then moving up, everything else subsequently is 4 stories. Just quickly moving through some of the elevations, as you saw before, some variation, adding some textures, high quality materials, things like that. That gray mass would be kind of a plank type product that's varied in color. So it appears as a single color in this elevation, but in reality, it would have some variation to add interest and maybe a little bit of texture to that surface. Similar here, what you're seeing in some of the shadow lines, and you'll see it a little bit later, are just some depth added through shadow lines and things like that. Similar condition here. And so this is one of those 4-plex buildings. This is the one closest to that neighbor. You can kind of see that shorter unit on one side. And then this is the building that is closest to Allworth, with the taller units on that side, to really emphasize that height that's allowed and encouraged at that Main Street corridor. And so this is kind of where we start to show some of that depth that we're proposing through, some of those shade structures, some depth in materials, and those wall thicknesses, and some of those, trim work that maybe doesn't add depth, but it kind of adds the perception of depth to it. And so this is just showing some of those shadow lines and some of those depth elements to help keep it from being such a flat wall. And then just really quickly, at a high level on the floor plans, I think the biggest comment would be the variety of housing. And bedroom counts and bathroom counts are really tangible. But one other thing that we wanted to design into these products was kind of a flexibility in the floor plans. So you'll see, these purple spaces in here. Those spaces are intended to be really flexible. So they can be offices, they can be, work from home spaces, bedrooms, guest rooms, things like that, just to really provide a lot of flexibility. So there's variety just in how the users and how the owners are going to use those actual spaces. So similar here. And so another way that we provided variety is providing bedrooms on different levels of the building. And so some units don't have a bedroom on the second level and some units do. And so that just kind of helps provide a little bit more variety in housing, a little bit more variety in use, and some flexibility in the product. And so similar condition here, you'll see that second floor is all living space. That's a larger space for more entertaining, or maybe you have a bigger family or something like that. And then similar here with the bedroom on the second floor. And then finally, just some really quick interiors inspiration images. This isn't necessarily what it will look like, but just kind of a spring point of what we think could complement that exterior and kind of the direction that we're thinking of, light, bright, and airy, but again, not necessarily what it would look like. And from that, I'll hand it back over to Joe.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I just want to do a quick overview of what happened on Monday night. We did get a recommendation of approval from the design review committee with some recommended changes. So one of them, Jennifer noted, regarding the additional fenestration on the Allworth elevation, which we will work with to do that. Can't remember his name, I apologize, but one of the commissioners wanted a different rendering of the terminal view. So right when you enter in the site, what is it going to look like? Kind of like what we had on the street elevation, but a little bit zoomed in about what are you going to see in that common area in the center when you enter? Is it going to be the rear end of a car because we have a guest space there, or is it going to be the landscaping? So they did add that. They asked about fencing, which I already discussed. They also wanted some additional colors to be proposed within the site, which we also agree to comply with. Lastly, they discussed adding additional glazing on the garage doors to just break up that facade on the first floor for anybody on that street. After that, again, we request your recommendation of approval to City Council for this combined preliminary and final plat and PUD, and I will stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Brown?
Sir, thank you very much for that, and a very interesting development. The person I want to direct my question to is your engineer. I believe you said that she is on Zoom.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Abby is on Zoom, or we have Kelly in here as well.
What's her name?
Abby.
Okay, Abby, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I presume that you have read Mr. Canning's report, the city engineer.
Yes, I have.
You noted since the plans were not, unfortunately, this happens quite often at preliminary schedule, the plans were not stamped, so he did not perform a complete review, as he noted. Just a minute, my iPad is going to help me address the question there. It's back on. I want to ask you, do you understand the impact of what he wrote specifically with regard to a drainage report that will be required, and what the pertinent parts of that pertain to, especially the requirement for a basin map of some kind? Do you understand what those requirements are?
Yes, I do. Mr. Canning had reviewed our preliminary drawings. We have since moved through final and submitted stamped drawings there. Our drainage report will include the requirements from the city for the basin map and the appropriate calculations as well.
Then if you've already done that, then that sort of took away the rest of the questions. I don't need to ask you anymore. Okay, as long as
okay, great.
All right, so thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions for the applicant?
Can you remind me, those townhouses on the backside, I can't remember what direction, for the vinyl fence? What, are those 3 stories?
You're talking about the duplexes to the east, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
No, they're 2 stories. You can kind of see it. The center units are 2 stories, and then the end units appear to be single story, but you know, they have a pretty high pitched roof.
Okay.
And they are set back quite a ways.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Anything else for the applicant? Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, you'll have a chance to come back up if there's anything else you want to bring up that's brought up from staff or any public testimony. So thank you, and we'll hear from staff.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am just pulling up their most recent resubmittal from November 29th, 2022 for reference. Find it. I'm trying to find their landscape plans. This will work. All right, so this is subdivision fiscal year 2022-0008 for Chandler subdivision. It is a subdivision application that is processed as a planned unit development. And as a planned unit development, the applicant can submit waivers to code standards, such as minimum setbacks to allow for different setback dimensions, for allowing a greater number of lots to be accessible off of a common drive, and proposing non-compliant parking space sizes. However, the applicant has not requested any waivers formally. As such, staff has drafted waivers on the applicant's behalf based off of code compliance issues that came up during the analysis of the application. On Monday, December 19th, the design review committee recommended approval of this application. However, they did condition a few additional conditions of approval. As Joe, the applicant, had mentioned, there are 3 that are most pertinent to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first being that terminal view from 52nd Street into the development. The design review committee requested, or actually even conditioned, that the terminal view be enhanced through landscaping, even if it meant that the removal of the guest parking space happens. So they allowed for that guest parking space to be removed, which would cause a deficiency of 1 parking space in the development. The second waiver that is pertinent to the commission here tonight is that the design review committee required that the eastern property boundary fence be open vision fencing. However, there might be some conflict there because that fence along the eastern property boundary line is not technically the applicant's fence. It is the adjacent property's fence. So there, I would not recommend that condition being conditioned in your decision document and it be hashed out at City Council. The last one is that the design review committee required that the housing be a variety of colors or have a variety of color schemes to help meet the intent of the planned unit development code. So speaking of the planned unit development code, the section of that code requires that in any development that which proposes 10 or more dwelling units shall provide a variety of housing types. The proposed variety shall include attached units like townhomes and duplexes, detached units such as patio homes, single family and multifamily units, provided that the overall density limit of the district is still maintained. This application does not propose a variety of housing types and that all 12 units are 3- or 4-story townhomes of similar architectural design. The townhomes, while appearing similar in exterior elevations, do provide 3, 4, and 5 bedroom floor plans, with the 4th bedroom being a potential office space or a flex space. There are, despite there not being a variety of housing types, there are attached and detached townhome units. Please do note that during the January 19th, 2021 meeting, the Design Review Committee discussed the criteria related for the variety of housing to be provided when utilizing the planned unit development ordinance. The Design Review Committee reviews architectural variety, design, and aesthetics, whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission reviews the variety of housing types, such as multifamily, townhome, single family, etc., as proposed. This application is just over 17 dwelling units per acre, which is under the 35 dwelling units that is, or the 35 dwelling unit maximum that is set within the R3 zoning district. And it is also above the 16 dwelling unit per acre minimum of the neighborhood destination node per the comp plan. The proposed single family attached and detached residential units are consistent with the purpose of the R3 zoning district. So waivers have been drafted by staff based off of the analysis of the application. The first waiver is to setback standards, allowing for a minimum of 3.5 feet interior to the development, which creates a 7-foot gap separation between the structures. And I will try and pull up a plat if I can find it here. Yeah. So in the staff report on page 12, I was able to go into more detail as to what those setbacks look like for each lot. Essentially, they all consist of about 3.5 foot setbacks or a 0 foot setback for that interior lot line to allow for the shared common wall of those attached units. The only difference in the front setback for building 1 lot dimensions is that their front setback is 6.5 feet, which allows for a longer front setback to have that pedestrian pathway in there. So the waiver that is drafted in the decision document is for most sides to be 3.5 interior to the development, which again creates that 7-foot separation between structures. The second waiver is for more than 4 dwelling units accessed off of a common drive. As noted by the applicant, this waiver is not necessary any longer as it is accessed off of a private drive, not a common drive, but there is that discussion that there's not really a difference in our code. What is a private road and what is a common drive? So I would recommend that it just stays as a waiver to be safe in case there's any changes later on. The third waiver is parking space dimensional standards, allowing for a 9-foot by 20-foot parking space as opposed to the 10-foot by 20-foot parking space. And all these conditions have been drafted in the decision document to require code compliance of the issues that might not have been addressed in the initial submittal packet from November 29th. Code conflicts that have been conditioned for compliance include 4A8 utilities. So the on-site and right-of-way utilities adjacent to 52nd Street conflict with the proposed sidewalk as well as the proposed landscaping, or specifically the street trees along 52nd Street. So the utilities along 52nd Street, there is a pole that is to bisect the sidewalk, or at least that's what the plans show. However, it has been discussed that those utilities are to be put underground. So they are no longer conflicting with the sidewalk and the street trees. However, it is drafted in the decision document to make sure that even though those utilities are no longer overhead, even if they are put underground, they do not conflict with the required 4 class 2 or 3 street trees that are to be along that street of 52nd. So going into detail for the residential dwelling units, we'll go into code 84B, design provisions for residential structures. Building type A and B are located closest to East 52nd Street, with the front being the west facade facing the street. Let me see. The front facade appears to consist of a front porch and a direct pathway, which is compliant with code. Building type B and building 6 unit C1 located along the southern property boundary line have side elevations facing the south, which is facing that existing ACHD right of way. So while those units aren't directly on 52nd Street or Allworth or that corner, the design review committee has asked that for those elevations of those 2 units to the south to have more glazing and fenestrations to better address the street. Just simply because that existing ACHD right-of-way easement is not to be built on. And there aren't plans for it to be built on. As far as parking goes, there is a requirement of a total of 30 parking spaces. 24 of those are required within the residential dwelling units themselves, which has been provided in the 2 parking spaces of each unit. And there are 6 guest parking spaces required. The site does meet the parking requirements, but that is including a one on-street parking space. So they're only providing 5 on-site guest parking with 1 on-street. Staff would like to note that even though our code does permit for 1 on-street parking space to count towards that minimum requirement, it's not encouraged because ACHD might, at some point, they have the ability to take away the ability to park on street in that location. Additionally, as of Monday, the design review committee has drafted that waiver, recommended that waiver to allow for this terminal view guest parking space to be removed. And so they would only have 4 on-site parking spaces as opposed to 5. And then as far as bicycle parking goes, it's just been conditioned to have 2 bicycle parking spaces in common areas like code requires. There is pedestrian circulation throughout the development. However, the pedestrian connection across the common drive or the private drive is not evident. So it has been conditioned to require contrasting hardscape along the common drive to better identify those pedestrian crossings. As mentioned previously, there is a requirement for 4 class 2 or 3 street trees that are high and wide branching trees. It has been conditioned in the decision document to coordinate with development services staff as far as what those street trees should look like at a later point in time. While perimeter landscaping is not required of the development, there is not perimeter landscaping proposed along the eastern portion of the property, which is abutting a driveway and a residential unit or residential units. So while it wasn't required of the design review committee, nor is it required of code, it might be worth a discussion regarding the privacy of these 3- and 4-story tall townhomes. And as for the common open space, there was not a packet submitted or not a document submitted during the time of review. However, since then they have submitted supplementary material. I was able to review it and it is compliant with code. It has not been updated in the staff report or the decision document. So there is still a condition in the decision document stating it needs to be compliant with code, which as the commission, you can either choose to remove or keep in there. It is up to you, but as staff, I just recommend keeping it in there to be safe. So with that, I stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Excuse me, any questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shepherd?
I have a question about on page 13 of the decision in the conditional use finding number 1, where it says it cuts off adjacent properties. I guess I didn't understand exactly where that was, like on the map. Is that where you were talking about the I don't know what side, the far side on this side of the room? They don't have landscaping.
So you said page 13 on a finding?
Yeah, there's a place where it says it cuts off adjacent properties.
Yeah. So I'm not referencing it directly in front of me, but I do recall when I drafted this, it does essentially cut off other properties by turning its back on the adjacent properties. And again, it's just a draft. So essentially it could be opinion. Code doesn't really say that you need to address other properties, but it does need to be compliant and in conformance with the rest of the neighborhood. Whereas the adjacent property to the north is only a 1-story, I believe, residential dwelling unit, and the 2 to the, I'll call it the east, are 2-story duplexes. It might be, it just seems to isolate itself within its own development.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure exactly what that meant. So helpful.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Next step is a public hearing. So if there's anybody in the room or on Zoom that wants to provide testimony for this application, now is the time. So, oh, we got a hand raised. Don May on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Don May, 120 East 40th Street in Garden City. We are currently in a housing affordability crisis, and the more housing supply that comes online, the better, as greater supply inevitably lowers overall prices. I strongly support this application, including the parking waiver to only allow 4 guest parking spaces as opposed to 6. As an example of an close by city, Boise would only require a ratio of 1 to 10 guest parking spaces, which would mean only 2 total guest parking spaces would be required if this were in Boise. This is a standard ratio used across the nation, not just in Boise, and is what I believe should be applied in this circumstance. I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay. That said, the applicant could come up and provide any additional information or rebuttal if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commission, again, thanks for having us tonight. Just wanted to touch on a few things and just, I guess, reiterate some of the things I'd said before. One, we do appreciate the waivers and the clarification on what we do and don't need. We're fine with keeping that waiver in there for the common drive versus private drive. Understood. We're cool with that. For the buffer along 52nd, again, we did submit a comment response letter specifically to, I believe, all the items that Hannah covered. I hope that was in your packet and you had a chance to review that, but we will comply with the landscaping requirements along 52nd, including undergrounding the utilities and making sure the appropriate street trees are in that buffer. We will absolutely comply with that. Same with any of the open space, which you, again, if you leave that condition in, we will comply with the open space. We believe we have, as well as staff. In addition, we will comply with the bicycle parking. We will provide for bicycle parking within each garage, but it was noted that there could be additional ones on site. So we will add 2 spaces to the common areas. And then for the perimeter landscaping, again, we, as Hannah noted, it's not required by code, but there is that 6-foot wood fence on the east. There's not really an opportunity to integrate with that site. And that kind of speaks to the whole turning our backs or not to that site. It is already existing there. We do not control that fence. Secondly, there's just a little strip between that and then the proposed sidewalk that provides access to the units. And I can bring up the site plan again if you guys would like, but it's about 2 or 3 foot area, and we were going to propose gravel in there, which we can add shrubs. But if you guys want grass, then we can. It shouldn't be too hard, but shouldn't. Lastly, well, yes, my last 2 points. The diversity of housing, as I noted, we do believe that we comply with that the way that code has written it. Singularly, just the detached versus attached units. It does note detached patio units. I guess I would pose a question. Does that reference, 8,000 square foot detached patio homes, or is it just referencing detached units versus attached? But again, we do have our variety of bedrooms, our height differences, the different variations on the site of where these are located. So we do believe that we comply with the unit variation requirements in your PUD code. Lastly, R3, which is the existing zoning on the site, it does call for density. This is an infill site in that sense. There's already existing development all around it. The comp plan also calls for density in these areas along that Main Street corridor and along the mixed use residential designation. So we're not trying to turn our backs to any development, that's for sure. In essence, we are actually facing some of our units to the east anyways, even though we do have a fence that is the front of the units. And so we're definitely not turning our backs physically to those. And then the other 4 do front 52nd, which should create a really nice streetscape and really activate that sidewalk should anything get redeveloped further to the west. So again, with all of these things, we do appreciate your feedback and we appreciate your recommendation of approval. And if you guys have any outstanding questions, again, myself and our engineering team are here to answer those.
All right. Any further questions for the applicant? All right, great. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and move to discussion amongst the commission members. Commissioner Montoya.
Thank you for the application. I think you did a great job on the presentation. I've seen your presentations before and it was really well done. They show a lot of the questions that we have, so it makes at least my perspective easy to address. I do believe that from my perspective, you have the variety of housing types on this with the detached as opposed to just blocks of attached units, especially with the varying heights and the different layouts and room types too. So from my perspective, I think you did a very good job meeting that. I don't have any problems with the waivers. I'll probably defer to the fellow commissioners on the hammerhead parking or whatever you want to call that. I don't know that I'm too concerned with it, but I could see it being used and being useful in that area rather than just a landscaping spot. So I'd probably be more towards having that parking for the owners or users, especially because as opposed to the previous application that we just saw, you can't really park in the the driveway without having the back end of it sticking out. So just seems like more could be better there, especially what staff said about ACHD coming through and potentially removing parking from on site. So with that, I would recommend approval on this one.
And you're talking about that 5th parking space that
right in the middle
design review suggested.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brown.
For the most part, I agree with Commissioner Montoya. I really think it was an excellent presentation, and I want to commend your engineer. She satisfied my questions that I was going to ask, and I'm pretty well satisfied that she'll be able to handle what has to be done there. I agree with the other 2 commissioners probably on that 5th place. I think, and given the site, just my preference would be to have it stay as parking. And on the other question, along the east side fence, there's an architectural site plan. It's got the number 1 on it in here, but if you look on that, it pretty much shows you there's just a very thin strip there along the east side of the sidewalk. I would think if it was me, I would rather have some kind of small shrubs along there rather than having a strip of site of grass that you got to take care of. And I guarantee you that with the kind of shrubs that they have available fitted, you can probably get some zero scrape shrubs that will use very little water, as opposed to making that a grass strip that'll always be a pain because it's right against the fence. So you know what, when you're right against the fence, then you can't mow it with your mower. So you got to go back there with a weed killer, a weed thing. So I would think I would leave them with what they want to do there, and not certainly don't have them put grass in there. Anyway, beyond that, I think it looks to me like a pretty good development for that corner.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to commend you all on the presentation. It was very great and easy to understand. And I appreciate how all of your different professionals took us through the project. And I think it's really a great project. I don't have any problems with the variety of housing because you have the detached in the different floor plans and or square footage and everything. So I think it's a good plan, and I would recommend it go to City Council for approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Wild.
I'm supportive as well. You know, variety of housing types we've seen them all, and this certainly comports better than some others that we've approved. I think you've got a little bit of work ahead of you just in terms of what design review suggested, because it does look a little blocky. It needs some what is the word, variegation, fenestration, needs some of that. I'm supportive of the waivers. I was glad to hear Commissioner Montoya talk about that 5th guest parking spot, because I was shaking my head as it was described as having been recommended for removal. I would support this with that 5th parking spot. I think it makes more sense to leave it. You designed it that way. You should leave it that way. So I'm supportive.
And I'll just add that I agree with all the commissioners. I think it's a great project. So commend you for the work you've done on this. I'm completely satisfied on variety of housing as well. Echoing Commissioner Wild's comments, we've had other ones that have raised more eyebrows or maybe just questions, I guess. This one, I think it meets what we want to see with regard to variety of housing for a parcel this small, definitely. And then the parking thing everybody's hitting on. I mean, I guess I'm almost indifferent, but I mean, certainly, you know, parking versus additional landscaping is, I mean, yeah, I'm fine with that, keeping that 5th spot there. So that said, we all sound like we're supportive. I think we're ready for our motion. Oh, and I'll just say real quickly, as you already noted, but I didn't say up front, whatever we do here tonight, we're just recommending an action by City Council.
So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of application sub fiscal year 2022-0008 for the Chandler sub for combined preliminary and final plat subdivision as written by staff.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye, please.
Chairman, just a moment. A little bit. I think we probably need to mention the fact that some of the waivers were added in by the staff that weren't in it originally, if I'm correct, or are they all in this?
I thought you captured them. Yeah, they captured.
They all captured.
Yep.
And would include the one with the 5th site. Would that include the 5th?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, the waivers drafted do not include the parking space.
Yeah, I think so. You need to add that 5th site that we're putting back in.
but the parking space is included, so there wasn't a waiver to remove it.
Right.
It's as applied for. It's my understanding it's as.
Doesn't include that waiver.
Yeah.
Design review recommended removal of that.
Yeah.
space
Exactly.
This week. We're recommending approval with that space.
Correct. So the as drafted for planning and zoning, the waivers do not include the parking space, so you're keeping the parking space as proposed.
Correct. That's
Needs to be in the motion.
No, because it's already,
it's in the application.
it's in the application already. Yeah. Yep, so I think we're good. So let's do our motion one more time, if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner Wild. I mean, excuse me, Commissioner Montoya.
I'm motioning for approval of application sub fiscal year 2022-0008 for the Chandler sub for a combined preliminary and final plat subdivision processed as a planned unit development and as written by staff in the decision document.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the recommendations off to City Council. Thank you for staying here late with us this evening. All right. The last one was was one I wanted to hear, and I will make it quick. It's CPA FY 2022-4 code text amendment for accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
Almost no one.
Next one.
Good night. Jen, I'll make this super easy. I think it was really good. So I'll start before you present because I had one question. So I think we'll make it quicker. The stipulation in the new code text is that accessory dwelling units could be mats of 600 square feet or 50% of the primary dwelling unit on the parcel, whichever is larger. All I wanted to ask was, it seems to me like 600 is still really small. Could that square footage for the ADU go up to 800? 800, then 50%. And I don't know how the other commissioner members feel about it.
Really big.
It is,
Like
but if
your
it's a
800
small.
idea, but 50% of the primary dwelling unit seems thick.
And that's true, but I think there's a lot of small houses with big lots in the city that may, they may have a 1,100 square foot house. And so I just thought, if somebody wants to build a 800 square foot house, that just seems, anyway, I love it. I think it's great. That's all I wanted to
Sorry,
ask.
we jumped ahead.
Chairman, members of the commission, I think that's great. For those of you who may not have been on the commission 2 years ago, there was an application that came through that wanted an ADU that was larger than 600 square feet. So this commission worked through and made a recommendation to amend the code. And this ordinance is roughly drafted off of that. It went to the legal department. However, the legal department did recommend putting back in a square footage. And so that's where that 600 creeped back into the ordinance. And certainly this commission could recommend larger or whatnot. And I think that the legal department added back in a square footage just to try to avoid subjectivity dealing with the incidental and subordinate language. But certainly this body can amend the recommendations and take out square footage in its entirety again, or recommend to take that back out or increase the size, whatever is the recommendation that you wish to move forward with.
Did you come up with 800 thin air or?
That's the word the phrase I was going to use, thin air. Yeah. Doesn't have to be 800, but my whole thing was that 600 seems small for a situation where it would apply. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brown.
I'd be prepared to support 800.
Okay.
Sort of a compromise rather than not taking it clear out, because I remember when we did this.
Yeah.
Some of us were we're on the board. We had quite a discussion because that application, as I recall, the ADU was bigger or as big as the house.
It was just around the corner from what you just approved.
I was just
That's
gonna say,
exactly,
yeah.
that's exactly right. I swear it is.
It was on the site, I think, same site.
Boy, it's the same place.
That's
It's the same parcel.
yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that's the parcel?
I wondered about that.
It's the same parcel.
Are you serious?
Oh, well, I'm willing to go with it. The stupid thing, if it falls over, it doesn't, you can't hear anything. I'd support 800.
So I guess we could just discuss that if you know, I'm gonna support 650% if that's what we end up doing, but I just wanted to ask. So how everybody else feels.
Well, how can we support you if you're being so wishy-washy?
So I don't know whether it makes difference or not, but City of Boise is 700 square feet.
Okay, thanks for
Split the
looking at that.
difference. Good idea. Commissioner.
Mr. Shepherd?
Thank you. I like 800 square feet, although I'm trying to imagine it if it's like 50%, 800 square feet or 50%, whichever is greater. I'm just trying to imagine like different scenarios, like what size house would have to be. You have to have a 1,600 square foot house or more.
Right.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine like how much 600 square feet is. But 800 seems like more reasonable because we're also requiring like kitchen and everything.
But if you got a 3,000 square foot house and a big lot, you can put another 1,500 square foot house on the back.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And if you have the property, is there a problem with doing that? Would we not want that? Is that too big for an ADU?
Well, the word accessory to me suggests a limit, that it's accessory to the primary dwelling. And I think in that example scenario, it's not that many. It's a secondary primary residence or something.
I wonder if we could put a maximum, like there's a minimum.
I guess that's what I'm thinking might be smarter.
So Boise does no larger than 700 square feet or 10% of the lot size, whichever is smaller.
Whichever is smaller.
But that's a percentage of the lot size, of the lot, not of the house.
But doesn't that make more sense? I mean, again, if it's an accessory dwelling unit, shouldn't it relate to the size of the lot, not to the size of the house on the lot? That seems to make more sense.
Yeah, you're effectively capping it out at 700 square feet because you figure that would be 7,000 square feet of the lot, which would be what, a quarter of a lot, or way less than that, an eighth of a lot, 7,000 square feet.
So let's do 800 cap. 10%. You get a bigger ADU compared to the city than Boise, but you're still capping it. You're still relating it to the size of the lot, the size of the primary dwelling.
So the largest you can do is 800 square feet.
Which again is pretty. It's pretty intense. Accessory dwelling. Well, I guess what I mean, this is an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So I guess I'm just trying to avoid those scenarios where we have big lots. And just, it's two houses on a big lot, on one big lot. That should be a subdivision. It should be two lots and a 3,000 square foot house and 1,500 square foot house. That's called a subdivision, not an ADU.
Is there any other code that would kick in that scenario? Would require it to be subdivided?
We kind of went through that last meeting, didn't we? Wasn't there one on? I thought there was one that we denied.
It was the commercial use though, right?
One before that.
That was a commercial use thing.
You had a residential.
Was it that one?
Commercial use.
Yeah, right. They had both things going on one lot.
I think the scenario in my mind, and I don't even know if there's any lots in Garden City that apply to this, but if somebody has like a mansion in a huge lot and they wanted to put like a big guest house, you know, like some of those houses aren't small 800 square feet houses. Would that be a subdivision then if someone wanted to do that? If we even have those here?
Chairman, members of the commission, is as long as it's single ownership with some few, there are a few caveats, but no, a subdivision would not be kicked in the accessory code right now if they were to add, well, current code, anything under 600 square feet, they're allowed to do that, but current code has the cap at 600 square feet.
Yeah. I guess my whole point for bringing this up is I have no idea how many 1,100 square foot homes we have in Garden City that have room to build an accessory dwelling unit, but I imagine there's a number of them that confining them to 600 square feet seems small to me. And now all I was trying to do was allow somebody to say, you know what? My mom needs 800 square feet. She needs a kitchen, even though my house is, even though it's almost going to be as big as my 1,100 square foot house. I'm just trying to give the person living in the dwelling unit the opportunity to have more space, because 600 seems really small to me. That's all I was trying to.
Chairman, if I may, Portland, Oregon allows for 800 square feet, so slightly larger than Boise's. And then California's default law for all municipalities is 1,200 square feet or 50% of the principal structure.
Okay.
If that complicates things more for your discussion.
So is that where you got the 50% from, California?
It may be. I didn't draft this myself. So the legal, Jessica Stedman with the legal department took your recommendation and then added the one item of discussion in addition. So,
well, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about this possibility of a large lot. The first thing we did tonight, it had how many units were there? 7. That was one lot. I'm very familiar with the lot because the commercial property that's on the northeast on that now shared driveway is Glad's Automotive. They've taken care of my Jeep for 15 years and they're very personal friends. I've been there by there many times. It had a trailer house on it and it's one lot. So you could have had on that lot, it's a half acre, and there are others over there that are that size. You could have that situation with an 1,100 square foot place and I wanted to put another unit on it. So there are some over in that old part of Garden City.
Yeah.
I would suggest movement decide doing what I said we should do, but I would like to support what you originally said and said that we go along with 800. And what was the percentage of the primary unit?
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, or 50%, which is ever greater, is how it's currently drafted.
Sure. Why don't we do that?
Okay. Let's have a motion.
All right, I'll try it. I'll take a shot. All right. I recommend that we approve a recommendation to the City Council for CPFY 2022-0004 Code Text Amendment on Accessory Dwelling Units, and we modify the original document that Jenna put together to allow for a minimum of 800 square feet, okay, or 50% of the primary dwelling unit. And that's all we need, that I need to do, and all the other factors that are in it, because I will say the most interesting thing and important to me in it is the fact of requiring that they be picked up as a real estate unit and be on a foundation. That's, to me, was the most important part. So
yeah, agree with that.
That's not part of my motion. I'm just talking. And that's my motion.
Okay, there's our motion.
850%.
Do we have a second?
More clarifying question.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So if I understood correctly, your motion is a minimum of 800 square feet or 50%.
No, I think you're just changing 600 to 800 or 50%.
Right.
Whichever.
And the cap is whichever is greater is the cap.
Yeah, that's
so if you have an 1100 square foot primary dwelling unit, the biggest you can go with his motion is 800 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
But if you have a 2000 square foot house, primary dwelling unit, you could go up to 1000 square feet. That's.
She's correct. I misspoke. The 800 is a maximum for.
Right, so it's whichever is greater. So
exactly, whichever is greater, that wording that you originally put in there, okay?
Right. So does that make sense?
But if you're saying whichever is greater and someone has a 2000 square foot house, then 1000 square feet, if we're saying 50% is greater than 800, which means it can keep going on up.
No, they put 1000. They can put a ADU of 1000.
Yeah, and if they have a 5000 square foot house, then we get into the secondary home, which would be a 2500 square foot house. So, I mean, there are lots of.
Which is correct. I mean, that's what would yep.
Just wanted to make sure.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, that's how the wording is set up. Right?
Yeah.
So we do have our motion. Is there a second?
I can second it.
All right. There's our second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any nays?
No.
Oh, I second this. Does that mean I have to like be in favor of it?
Yes.
I still am a little, and again, I don't know that there's going to be big enough lots if this is even relevant in Garden City, but there could be, we're calling it an ADU, like a secondary home.
No, there are a few lots that are much bigger. Okay. Yeah. If you go over on the end of Marigold, you know where Marigold is. You go down there. There are quite a few right over there that are quite large.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to complicate the conversation.
No, you're good.
So, Star, to answer your question, when you second a motion, you do not need to vote in support of it. You can second it for the purpose of then hearing more discussion.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then changing your mind.
But 800 is not the minimum. Like if you wanted to do a 600 square foot. Okay.
That is correct. Okay.
All right.
All right. Any other discussion items that we need to have?
Chairman, if I may, just to accurately reflect what occurred where this did pass, there were 2 nays. And can I ask if it was because there's not a cap?
I can speak for myself. Again, I think it's more important how it relates to the lot size, not to the primary dwelling. So I guess another way to say that is I don't like the California model. I do like the whatever the other model, the Boise, again, city of Boise.
That was my reasoning as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think we have any other discussion items, so we are adjourned. Right.
Thanks for the